I'm Dr. Ryan Stivers. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and this is the Three Pairs of Glasses podcast. For a long time, many of us were taught directly or indirectly that emotions are something to manage quietly, that therapy is for people who are broken, and that being a man means staying strong no matter the cost. In this episode, we talk honestly about what that cost actually is. We explore how suppressing emotion shows up later in our bodies, our relationships, and the ways we cope, and how stoicism and always needing to have it together can quietly work against us. Together, we reflect on the importance of finding safe people, building intentional friendships, and recognizing that we have agency in choosing who we want to become. This isn't about abandoning strength, it's about redefining it. So wherever you're listening from, we invite you to slow down, listen in, and maybe try on a new lens as we talk about rewriting the rules of manhood.
Welcome to our Men's Mental Health Roundtable podcast. I'm Brandon Hovey, LCPC psychotherapist here at Summit Family Therapy. With me, I've got Nate Oldenburg, LCPC, also a psychotherapist, and our Chief Clinical Officer here at Summit Family Therapy, Dr. Ryan Stivers, LMFT. We're here today to talk about something very crucial, yet something frequently overlooked, and that's men's mental health. What messages did you learn about growing up and learning about what it meant to be a man? What did men's mental health mean, really?
I think that's what hits me first is how the media portrayed mental health. You know, what were we called? Therapists were called shrinks. You know, you gotta go talk to the shrink. And just thinking about different TV shows like Law and Order just pops into my mind. You know, they would talk about how an officer had to go see a shrink, or you know, the victim had to go see the shrink, and immediately that term says, it's shameful. You know, you got to avoid seeing the shrink. Don't talk to the shrink, right? So that's what popped up into my mind right off the bat.
Nate, how about you?
For me, it was more of, you only saw someone in mental health if you had a problem, like if you had an anger management problem, or if you were being bad in some way or causing trouble to other people, then you had to go see, the counselor or psych because something was broken and needed fixing.
Well said. You know, I can relate to both of those examples very well. You know, our profession, even as recent as the 1990s, we frequently were viewed as the shrinks, to borrow your word, Ryan. I mean, we weren't looked at as, what Dr. Ben Pronk talks about, a mechanic for the mind. But when did you two realize that suppressing and compartmentalizing emotions has consequential effects?
Not nearly as soon as I would have liked, is the short version. But for me, it was probably that transition into college, where about 4 to 6 years of backlogged emotions all came out second semester, freshman year of college. And it was like, oh, this is not good. And then I actually went and saw a therapist of my own choosing for a bit to start working on some things, because I realized I got a lot of anger and resentment built up, and clearly this is not working for me.
In my social psychology class in undergrad, we did I think it was a depression screener, and I forget the specific name, but everybody took the screener and we did not put our names on it, so it was confidential. And we turned it into the professor. And I remember my score was the lowest the most depressed in the class. I think a higher score was better. A lower score indicated that you were very depressed. And I just remember sitting there thinking, oh, I guess I'm depressed. I need to look into that. So that was my first sort of check moment.
Truly a check engine light coming on. I frequently give my clients the BDI, the Beck Depression Inventory. And when the score is in the 20s, I frequently say to clients, you made the best decision coming in here. This is where we can really start meeting the road to recovery versus waiting too late when the bill of waiting too late becomes an issue? And what is the cost of staying strong at all times for us men?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very high expectation that creates a lot of emotional pressure, and that emotional pressure has to go somewhere. It's an energy,
Yes.
We might think that we're doing the right thing by bottling it up, but everything comes at a cost. I like that, that metaphor of a cost, and the price that I think we pay is, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being. You see it coming out in addictions. You see it coming out in very toxic relational dynamics that keep repeating over and over again. That can simply look like just isolating yourself from the people that love you, family members, partners, whatever. You just cut them off, wall them off, because you have all of this stress. You just don't know what to do with it. So then your relationships are paying the price, right?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm going to borrow what you just said earlier, that idea of the energy. It's a transmission getting dropped.
Mm-hmm.
We are thinking we're doing ourselves a favor by slamming ourselves into park, by isolating some sort of self-soothing. But if it is a toxic self-soothing, it's going to, again, be a cost we don't want to pay.
I'm going to start with a little bit of humor here and quote Shrek, better out than in.
That's a great way to put it.
Because seriously, yeah, if you get the emotions out in a non-harmful way, it typically works out far better for you in the long run. Because when you suppress or shove down emotions, I've heard multiple analogies. One of my favorite is a dam. So there's water building up and building up and building up behind the dam, and eventually one of two things happens to that dam. Either the water starts overflowing the dam, or cracks start forming in the dam, and it all comes out at once.
Once more, that energy needs to go somewhere, and we may not like its destination if we're not considering getting the help and care we need. What about traits? What were some male traits that maybe we were conditioned to view as helpful, but as we grew, we realized they were harmful to ourselves and others? What comes to mind?
Stoicism immediately comes to mind. The always having it together and always being logical, rational, always making the right decision for you, your spouse, and your family. So that sense of just always having to have it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it almost creates this superhuman-like expectation that you cannot make a mistake. Unfortunately, as we all know in our profession, it's like we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. And if you don't have the permission to make a mistake, goodness, I mean, it's like there is no wiggle room. Yeah.
One of my favorite movies is Terminator 2. And the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character at the end of the movie, makes the comment, "I now know why you cry." It's very toxic to have that stoicism because no one is a cyborg.
Mm-hmm.
We're human beings. Us men, especially, we're frequently isolated from our emotional sphere. We have to meet that sphere. So again, that energy doesn't corrupt us. It doesn't cause us to go off the rails. We have to know why we cry, but also we have to allow ourselves to do that crying when that time arrives.
I think hearing you talk, Brandon, I'm thinking of the social expectations that other men place on other men when it comes to doing what you said, feeling feelings, showing feelings. It's almost like there's this social expectation that we will view you as weak if you feel your feelings. And so then feelings become like by default, they're a threat. Feelings are threatening. And then you look at your feelings in a way that is very hurtful to yourself. And it's also very hurtful to the people around you, because not only do you see your feelings as a threat, then you look at other people's feelings as threatening, right? And then that opens the door for relational trouble and struggling, right?
relational trouble and struggling. And I love how you put that, how the perception of feelings change from, okay, this is normal, to where we're almost releasing T cells against our naturally reoccurring and occurring feelings that are just a byproduct of the human existence. And
Yeah.
when do we know a person is safe?
Mm-hmm.
When do we know there's a safe person we can be vulnerable with and we can engage with when it comes to the topic of our emotions?
Before I get to that, do you want to touch a little bit more on my experience with emotions?
Yes, please do.
I grew up having, very intense, kind of in your face kind of emotions, such that I could never, fully mask or hide them. It just wasn't possible. So there was always that sense of being different, sticking out, that added another layer of like, okay, I'm supposed to be like this, but I'm not. What does this mean about me? Which then made finding that safe person like all the more important, because here I am, sticking out with like a metaphorical sore thumb, without having a safe harbor. And honestly, it wasn't until the lovely invention of the internet and online messaging that I found more of those safe harbors, because there wasn't, that judgment or pressure there like there was in person. And it wasn't just from the other guys. It's very much also reinforced by, the women around us as well. You open up with the wrong person, with a guy, they'll make fun of you and probably move on. But if you open up around the wrong person in a more open social setting, like that can be used as ammunition.
Nate, I'm reminded of a quote you shared with me 3 weeks ago, and it was from a Brene Brown TED Talk, and it's about a horse.
Yep.
And I would love it if you could share that quote, because there's a lot of power to that quote on the topic of what we're discussing right now.
Yeah, I think the specific instance is she's at a book signing, and a husband is coming up, gives her the copies of the books to sign for his wife and daughters. And, he asks her, do you study men at all? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, that's convenient. And then he goes on to say, you see, my wife and daughters over there, they'd rather me die on top of my white horse than to see me fall. And that, for him at least, he comes from the perspective, and he goes on to say, it's not the coaches and the other men that are harsh on me. It's the women in my life that are my harshest critics.
I was hearing you guys talk. It reminded me of, how do you know when someone is safe? Well, sometimes you don't know until you meet someone who is actually safe, and they give you that unique experience of, this is what a safe relationship feels like. I'm reminded of the fun little story of the young fish who is swimming in the sea and bumps into this older fish, and the older fish turns to the younger fish and says, "Hey, how's the water?" And the younger fish is like, "Water? What's water?" I didn't realize that they were swimming in water. And I think we have a lot of experience like that with our feelings and safety. It's like, we don't know what safety is because we've been swimming in this water all our lives that we just know as water.
Yeah. And, I think it's important for us to recognize the value of building those relationships once we find those safe people, because it's not a one and done thing. Once you find that safe person, you're not building a bridge once, you're constantly revisiting that bridge building. And have you two ever been benefited by an intentional friendship?
First experiences in grad school, working my master's degree, I refer to those 2 years as the most expensive 2 years of therapy I have ever paid for, because I met these professors who were seasoned clinicians, and here we are sitting down in these rooms with these professors having these conversations, and I'm watching them interact with clients, I'm watching them interact with other students, and I'm like, oh wow, there is something else. I couldn't quite put my finger on it then. I could feel it. I could see the distance. But it was then I knew, hey, there's another way of interacting with your feelings and other people and relationships that is a lot healthier. Yeah.
Nate, how about you?
I think I had my big shift probably at the end of college. Most people think end of college, oh, that ends on a high note, but for me, honestly, the end of college was probably one of the lowest points of my entire life because I had just been dumped by my fiance. I was
Mm.
going back in with my parents. Uh, some other things would come out that would make things worse between me and my very close friends at the time as well. I was leaving behind all my college friends and, possibly never seeing them again. Uh, and I was faced with this situation where here I am stuck alone with my thoughts. And I know with everything I'm going through, like, this is not where I want to be by myself. Okay, who can I reach out to? Who can I have, that intentional connection with that will, check in on me and, help me get out of my head. And that was just a big transition time. And then finding out some not great things about a best friend, it just added fuel to the fire of, okay, I need more than just a friendship, and got me into therapy for myself again at that point.
These two episodes in each of your lives, it sounds like they were catalysts. And what was the most meaningful discovery in these catalysts for the two of you?
For me, this was a process because
Okay.
when I went back into therapy for myself, I used the free counseling that we got as part of grad school. So initially you get, some other basically counselors in training. So it's like, oh yeah, people are kind of at the same point in the process as me kind of thing. So mileage varies. But then I got their supervisor who's, clearly been doing counseling for a while. And I think she was the game changer for me because instead of, just reciting the same old things that I've already kind of played through a million times in my own head, she said, what's going on with you is you look for, a different quality in friendship, and that is hard to find, people that you can really connect with, people that, uh, there's something deeper with and not just the surfacey stuff. And on the plus side, that means you really value those connections, but on the hard side, it takes time to get there.
It is not an overnight process. You were right.
So I think for me, one of the biggest early realizations I had was that I had absorbed the emotions and the energy. Let's go back to that word, the energy from people around me, particularly growing up, right? And I was reacting and living in a way that was not thinking through what I was actually doing. It was a very automatic thought process in my brain, very automatic with my emotions, not really understanding how to have feelings, how to have relationships, because I was just doing what I thought was supposed to be. And it was a process like Nate too. Heck, I'm still working on it right now, of being more intentional with what I'm feeling, understanding it, not just reacting automatically.
I frequently discuss values with my clients, regardless of where they're at in life. I will ask, what are your values? And it sounds like in those years, you began to become acquainted with your values.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the fun processes of therapy, is realizing some of the values that you've adopted in your life are not actually your values. And when I use values, it can be a very helpful value. It can also be a very hurtful value. And the nice thing about having a therapeutic space is like making the decision. I want this value in my life, or I don't want this value in my life. And then making a conscious choice of adopting that.
You use the word absorption, and when you're absorbing others' energies, others' values, you can really lose sight of yourself as a man.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the greatest benefit for realizing, what, this doesn't serve me anymore?
I mean, I would say it's more than just the family of origin. I think, backing up slightly, first, realizing that emotions are there to get our needs met.
Mm-hmm.
Even sometimes when they don't make sense, it's serving a purpose, it's serving a function, and it's understanding that function that the emotion is serving. And then that rolled into okay, well, what have I been taught about all these things? What are the values? And my big philosophy of therapy is very much centered on, shoulds. And not all shoulds are created equal. There are a lot of shoulds that we internalize from our parents, from society, from friends, from acquaintances, from authority figures that had some level of influence on us along the way, from religion, on and on and on. And we just kind of sit there and internalize them over our childhood and young adult years, really, and don't really think too much about, are these helping me? Are these going to be a accurate measure of the way I want to live my life? Are these what's best for me or even people in general?
I agree, Nate. It's very liberating. How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Nate said, and maybe I think I might just tag on to it. It's realizing that you have agency, which is the fancy word of saying the ability to make a choice. Takes a lot of effort and courage to fight back against a lot of those things that we've adopted throughout our lives. So whether, like Nate was saying, whether a cultural should, a family of origin should, a relation, whatever, friendship should, even a spiritual religious system should, you can make a choice that you feel most comfortable with.
It's actually making a decision regarding who you want to be.
Exactly.
Versus carryover, well, like a version of software that keeps getting upgraded. You're not your dad version 4.0. You're who you are. You don't have to be your dad. You don't have to be your grandpa. You can be who you are and become the man who you wish to be. How do we think we could redefine masculinity in a more positive way?
Well, I like to pull an example from media, and I don't know if either of you guys have seen Cinema Therapy at all. They do a really good talk on healthy masculinity, pulling from Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, and it's a fantastic episode. Highly recommend people watch it because it really gets into what healthy masculinity can look like, because he's there and he wants to do right by others. He's not afraid to show his emotions. He's not afraid to fight for what's right and stand up for what he values and believes in, but he doesn't just steamroll everybody.
But he's not forgetting what he comes from and what he values, and he's this presence of quiet strength, but he's vulnerable when he needs to be.
I'm thinking about one thing, Brandon, is adopting the idea of how do I show up in relationships. It is an intentional thought of I need to be aware of how other people see me, how they experience me. I think by default, we are all inherently selfish, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But unhinged, unchecked selfishness can be like a runaway train, and you'll plow through. I think someone just said plow through a moment ago, through your relationships, through your job, and you'll be left wondering, where am I in life and what is going on? Who am I?
I think it's important to have values. I
Yeah.
think it's important to fill up your soul. But if everybody else suffers on the way, then we really have a problem. That's where we get Napoleon Bonaparte's and other folks from. People who are very talented, who have the capacity for great things, but they ruin others along the way. And I think what you said about showing up and asking, okay, what is my inventory that myself brings in to all of my relationships, my business relationships, my personal relationships, my romantic relationships, my family relationships? How am I seen? How am I seen? So how can I see others?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to build off of something that Ryan brought up, the inherent, selfish nature of humanity. The other thing that I kind of tacked on to that is, while we are inherently selfish and the limitations that come with that, we're also inherently very social.
Yes.
And what we find is, as a baby, we're inherently very selfish because that's the only way we survive.
Yes.
Correct.
And as we grow up, the inherent need for the social helps us to adapt and interact, but at the same time, sometimes causes us to shove things down and not prioritize self when we need to be.
Well said.
I'm going to ask something very invasive of the two of you now.
As long as you answer it too.
I will.
Yes.
I will. You have my guarantee. But this moment of where you look at the writing on the wall and things have to change. When was that moment that you realized things had to change in a different direction?
Brandon, I have those moments pretty much every day.
I hear you.
I mean, it really is every day to different degrees, though. I mean, some days it's pretty low on the totem pole, but other days it's like, wow, I need to really make a huge shift here. And oftentimes for me, it's in situations when my values, how I see things, rubs up against the people around me, like particularly my family, my wife and my kids. That's when I'll usually know, wow, I need to behave differently. I need to change a value.
Well said. And Ryan, I absolutely am thrilled that you brought up this is not a one and done process. Personal growth is something that is intentional. It's daily. It's realizing, hey, you know what? That choice I made, it didn't really serve anybody but me. That's a very sobering moment. And when I have those moments, I don't enjoy them by any means, but I recognize, hey, this is an invitation to be the next best version of me.
I definitely think change is a really difficult thing. In fact, one of the things I came up with in grad school is a little quote I have about change, and that change occurs when the pain of staying the same outweighs the perceived pain of doing something differently. And sometimes the pain of doing something differently is so small that it's a no-brainer. But sometimes the idea of doing something different is so foreign, so scary that it causes us to stay stuck in downright unhealthy situations for years, if not decades even.
When was there a time when being vulnerable was a relief?
I think I see it the most, or I felt it the most, personally and professionally, is when you open up and you're vulnerable and somebody else says, hey, me too. I can understand. I've been there. It's the common human experience to think that you're the only one. And the reality is you're not. But as long as you stay behind that wall that I am the only one and I cannot possibly open up, because once they hear this about me, their view of me will change. You're living in a self-built prison that you think is actually protecting you, but it's actually keeping you stuck from growing.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of Creed's song from the 1990s, I Created My Own Prison. And that song sometimes fits like a glove when we're not vulnerable, because we think we're terminally unique, when in reality, we have had many experiences that others will share.
Yeah, and to build off of that, a quote that I share with clients a lot is, we are unique combinations of non-unique experiences. No one has been through exactly all the same things that we have been through, but everyone has been through at least one thing that we've been through.
If there was one rule we could rewrite about being a man, which rule would we rewrite?
Whole, do not be perceived as weak rule, and chuck that one out the window. That one needs to go, because what we often perceive as weakness is really true bravery. It's to borrow again from Brene TED Talk, it's the man in the arena quote. It's people don't want to see you show up when you've got it all together and you're wearing an invincible coat of armor. They want to see you when you're struggling and when you're overcoming and when you're rising to the occasion. And that doesn't happen when you have it all together. That doesn't happen when you see yourself as all that in a bag of chips. That happens when it's like, okay, well, no one else is sticking up for this, but someone needs to, and you rise to the occasion and, follow through on that, even though it's hard, even though it's scary, even though it's vulnerable.
You don't always have to be right. You don't always have to be aggressive, which is kind of a different way of stating what just Nate shared.
Mhm.
But let the people in your life influence you, to take a Gottman quote. Let your partners influence you. Let your kids influence you. Listen. That's what that means, is listen and understand where the people around you are coming from before you act. And listening doesn't mean that, you've got to be the alpha male and
Correct.
just destroy other people's opinions and assert yourself to the point where you're like overcoming. That's not weakness. That's immaturity. And
If no one is willing to say, hey, Dad, this isn't the way to the place, this isn't the way to the restaurant, because you have created an environment where it's your way or the highway, we have a problem. That unbridled selfishness has consequences. And the consequences are you're going to miss your dinner reservation by 40 minutes at that moment. But the longest term consequences, how is your behavior going to speak into how your family relates to others?
Building off that is another fun analogy that I'm reminded of, and that's good drivers will sometimes miss their exits. Bad drivers never miss their exits, because they aren't thinking or caring about anyone else other than, oh, I need to get off here, and then they just swerve across a whole bunch of lanes, not caring about the consequences, not caring about how it could seriously harm them or anyone else, and they just go.
And I just want to thank you for the time you put into this conversation today. I think we're going to have a lot of content to edit and chew on. And
yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm sitting here kind of having a fun thought in my brain, like, what should we call this thing? I'm like, let's call it like 3 pairs of glasses or something.
Let's do it. Let's do it. That is brilliant. Well done.
Sure, go for it. I'm terrible at naming things, so if someone else wants to volunteer for that.
I love it. 3 pairs of glasses. I love it. I love it.
To build off that 3 pairs of glasses, that's another big thing that I emphasize in therapy is sometimes you got to change the lens that you're looking at your life through.
You said that so well. My 7 p.m. last night, that was a conversation we had at length. Lot of, Ryan, I love that term, a lot of absorption and not a whole lot of, hey, I need to see myself for who I am so I can be who I actually want to be. Just a lot of growth in that 7 p.m. session last night. It was neat.
As we wrap up this conversation, we want to leave you with this. Change doesn't usually come from one big moment. It happens daily in small, intentional choices about how we should show up for ourselves and for others. Rewriting the rules of manhood doesn't mean rejecting strength. It means allowing influence, letting ourselves be known, and releasing the pressure to never be seen as weak. Vulnerability isn't the absence of courage, it's often where courage begins. If something in this conversation resonated with you, you're not alone. So many of us are quietly carrying similar questions and pressures, even when it doesn't look that way from the outside. Thanks for spending this time with us. This has been the 3 Pairs of Glasses podcast. A reminder that sometimes growth starts by changing the way we see ourselves, our stories, and each other.